Is getting set up. All right.
Does anyone ever say
no?
No, you may not live stream me.
No, I think we're good to go. There we go. All right. Well, welcome everyone and good evening. We're at our next workshop in our virtual ministry fair, Servants of the Spirit, Gifts for Ministry. Before we begin, I'd like to thank Ms. Ada Ramirez for providing Spanish translation for today's session. There is no default language, so please be sure to click on the interpretation icon at the bottom of your screen and select either English or Spanish. As a reminder, the session is being live streamed to the diocesan Facebook page and YouTube channel and will be available for viewing on demand. A link to the video along with the resources presented will also be available on the EDLA Convention website at www.diocesanconvention.com. We are joined this evening by Terry Knowles, member of the program group on Stewardship, to talk about transparency and budgeting. During our time together tonight, we would love to hear from you. Anytime you have questions or comments, feel free to put them in the chat, and you're also welcome to unmute and chime in. And now I turn it to you, Terry.
Hello, everyone. I am so glad to see you. My name is Terry Knowles, and I am the Director of Giving and Stewardship at All Saints Church in Pasadena. A position I have held for just about 2.5 years. It didn't look a lot like they were supposed to look when I started this job, but I've been a member of All Saints since 1992 when I moved here. Prior to that, Mary and I were just reminiscing a little bit. I was CEO of the Los Angeles Master Chorale at the Music Center for 15 years. 15 absolutely wonderful years. And so I am very happy to be with you tonight to talk about this very important topic of transparency and budgeting. I am going to share some slides with you, big surprise, I know, except that they have disappeared. So give me just a second here and I will find them. There we go. We'll start this from the top. There we go. So, already said this, welcome. I'm so glad that you've joined us this evening to give us an hour of your time. And I told you a little bit about myself. The purpose of our webinar this evening is to have a conversation, and I really would like to have a conversation and ask you to feel free to chime in either in the chat or verbally if you like, about budgeting for our parishes and how to do that with transparency and how to do it effectively. And our goal is that all of us, all participants, have a better understanding of the importance of a budgeting process that is open and candid and realistic and fully transparent. I would like to learn from you as well as you possibly learning from me. So please do feel free to speak right up. If you have questions or comments, we can take them as we go along. Samantha's going to be watching the chat because I'm no good at talking and watching the chat. And we hope we won't miss anything. So diving right on in. Why does transparency matter anyway? And it's pretty simple. You would have figured this out yourself. Transparency in budgeting is important because it is a means to create trust. Trust is the important idea here within the parish leadership, among staff, and between the vestry and the congregation. I cannot emphasize enough how important this trust is and this important work that we do. I want to tell you a story about the budgeting journey that we took last year at All Saints Church in Pasadena. And I will give you the fact that it was a very unusual situation a year ago. But by struggling with this the way we did, we learned a great deal. And I think we'll do this work differently forevermore, probably, which is a very good thing. For many years, as long as anybody I know can recall, the annual budget at All Saints was drafted by the parish administrator, who used what we call the incremental budgeting process. So each one year's budget became the basis for the next year's budget. Line items were adjusted, but only really in a slight sort of way. And all personnel costs, which is to say salaries and all other ancillary HR expenses, were lumped into one budget line, creating really a false sense of the cost of any discrete program or ministry. This was a giant number. This would be the giant number, I think, in probably any budget. In our case, when all salaries and HR were lumped into one place, it was about 60% of the budget. So you can imagine that parishioners looking at this would scratch their heads, not really understanding what does peace and justice cost other than what's there? What does the giving budget cost except what's there? So this was, it was unintentionally sort of a misleading way to go about this work. And the Finance Committee early last year had already determined to rethink the process when external circumstances accelerated the need for us to take some action. So in late spring of 2020, it became clear to us that income for the coming year, meaning this year, 2021, would be significantly lower. We estimated at the time about 20% lower, which for us was $1 million change. So we had to start talking right away about how to figure out a path forward, making those assumptions. A special task force was created to guide this process. It was mostly vestry members, plus our rector and me, to help us figure out how to go forward. Now, we knew that it was likely, because of this 20% forecast reduction, that we would have to restructure the organization, and that the restructure would most probably involve some staff reduction. Several positions, ultimately we learned that several positions would be eliminated, including 2 where the incumbents had been in these positions for many years. The initial steps were critically important at the time, and I'm going to argue that these initial steps are ones we should all take at least every couple of years. Every year would probably be better in order to affect the best sort of decision making that we do. The first is planning assumptions, and this is a concept that would apply to really any of the work that we do, but at the moment, of course, we're talking about budgeting. So these are statements about what we think are or will be the facts, the truth, or the reality that become one basis for decision making. I'll give you a couple of examples that we used a year ago in building the 21 budget. One of them at the time was financial insecurity. We assumed that financial instability was with us and that our income as an institution would be reduced. Another example is around opportunity and creativity, that to thrive, we would have to innovate parish-wide using technology, the talents of our parishioners, and new ways of thinking to live into our mission and values. In fact, last evening at our vestry meeting, we did this very exercise as we are working on the budget for 2022. We had a discussion around planning assumptions for next year. It is a very, can be a very vibrant, challenging, but it's a very important discussion to have. I would urge you to think about it if you don't do it already. The other initial step we took was to set guiding principles. Again, a concept that can be applied to a lot of the work that we do, but in this case, in respect to budgeting, these are statements that describe the parameters of decisions we make during the budgeting process. And I'll give you a couple of examples that we used at All Saints last year. Congregation and staff partnership. That the guiding principle was that we would empower the talents and skills of the congregation and staff efficiently and appropriately and with appreciation and respect. Another example is innovation, that we would need to be creative and resourceful as we responded to, little did we know how evolving the needs would be, the very evolving needs that were presenting themselves to us. In the interest of full transparency with the parish, as we knew that these major changes would emerge as this budget took form and was ultimately shared with our constituencies, we actually published our assumptions and guiding principles on the website and invited people, urged them to go there. There were about 8 assumptions and maybe 10 guiding principles, and we put them on the website and encouraged people to look at them, to think about them, and to ask questions about them. We wanted people to know how we were approaching this very challenging work. So the process, there's always a process, right? Involved, of course, the finance committee to make sure that we're sort of checking our work, if I could put it that way, and giving these leaders a chance to ask questions, help us clarify, challenge some of our thinking, maybe. We did 2 drafts of this budget. That's unusual for us, but it was important to do it under the circumstances. It's not a bad idea, I think, sort of going forward. The first draft, the first draft was given to the vestry 2 weeks before we would seek its approval. These people needed a chance to digest this information, to form and ask their questions. The task force had been working on this 2 meetings a week for 4 months. So we were very deeply involved, knew all of the ins and outs of what we were talking about, but these poor people hadn't seen any of it yet, and were being asked now to take action on this proposed budget. So we needed to give them a chance to have a look. A second draft was taken to the vestry. They had additional questions, which were very helpful. And ultimately, a third draft was taken and approved by the vestry. So now this slide will not move forward for me for some reason. Let's try this. I'm going to take a moment and stop sharing and reshare and see if I can catch up with myself. I apologize for that. Welcome to the others, though. Let's see if we can do this again. Sorry about this. Okay, there we go. Between presenting the first and second drafts to the vestry, our rector, Mike Kinman, was on the phone to 25 or so parish leaders, very generous supporters, letting them know that the final draft 2021 budget would have some pretty significant changes and impacts on the parish, and that once it was published, approved by the vestry and then published, he would want to talk with them in more detail. This we felt was good stewardship of these particular leaders in the parish. These were people we wanted to know what was going on sort of before they, read it in the paper, that kind of thing. And then the day after vestry approval, but before the budget was made public, Mike met with all staff. Also, an email was sent to the congregation with an embedded link to a video in which he could tell the story about the budgeting process and its outcome in a more inviting sort of format, if you will. And then about a week later, we had a town hall, sort of a new undertaking for All Saints, and one that's been very effective for us on a wide variety of topics, actually. We had a town hall where parishioners heard, again, same story, a little bit shorter. And then there was a hearty exchange of questions and comments from people who were watching the town hall. Last year being strange, one of the things that we did was to create a worst case scenario budget. We did it because we felt it was necessary to do a year ago, as we can all vividly remember, there was so much we did not know. And we felt we should be ready. And I will all credit to our now junior warden, who at the time was a senior officer with Planned Parenthood Pasadena, which was fearful about its government funding. And so it had produced a worst case scenario budget and stuck it in a drawer somewhere, just knowing it was there. And so we decided to undertake the same thing. And what we needed to do was figure out the bare minimum of resources that would be required to do worship in a situation where that was all that could happen. We put it away. Only 3 people have ever seen it. I'm one. Our rector is not one. But we knew it was there. We knew that the thinking had already happened. And so that if there was, real calamity, we had a plan. I'm not sure this is something we all need to do every year. It was, hair raising in process, as you might expect. But there is some value in having to look hard at the end of the day. What is it we really have to do to be a church, and what it'll cost, and how much money will we need to raise? So you might think about it, when you have nothing else to do, as an interesting exercise. But we felt it was necessary to do a year ago. That was never shared with anybody. There was zero transparency about that particular version of the budget, as you might expect. So what were the results? And yes, there was fallout from all this transparency. And it turns out that people were interested and they paid attention. They read what was on the website. We did a lot of messaging, driving people's eyeballs to the website, to where they could find information, and look at the draft budget, the assumptions and guiding principles. We wanted people to feel like they knew what was going on. Because of one reason being, of course, we were going to ask them to support this program for 2021. So they read what was on the website and they paid a lot of attention to it. And as I mentioned, we held a second town hall on the topic of the budget. There was very high attendance, lots of questions, lots of them challenging, and lots of comments. But the important thing is that people were engaged. They were interested in a way. I've been at All Saints for 30 years in a way I've never seen before. And so it was rewarding in that way. And there was fallout. We got a bunch of pushback and criticism. And some of the pushback was around this idea of restructuring, that people did not hear restructuring. They heard you're firing staff members. And so we still did the right thing. It was still the right thing to be absolutely upfront about all of it, and we would do it again. But I think probably one of the things we learned is that we can say the sky is blue all day long, but if a person wants a cloudy sky, he's going to find a cloudy sky. That we just need to be crystal clear in all cases, really, about our messaging. But in this case, and I will say to you honestly, that we're still hearing some of this. No restructure. I don't want to hear about that. You just fired people. Not the case, but hard to convince people at this point. So there was some learning there for us that I think was important. The other big fallout was in respect to our adult music program. Because we were taking 20%, $1 million out of our budget, every single program and ministry had sacrifice. I'm sure you would see it the same way. And we're all in, so we're all in. But when the adult music program was reduced by 50%, we heard this sort of comment, how dare you cut the music budget in half? These were the loudest voices. And There's a memorable meeting that Mike and I had with the adult choirs in which we heard a lot of points of view from people about what was going on, but I stand by, it was the right thing to do, absolutely. And we're in a better place now when we talk about going forward about the budget, because, this was a hard process for a lot of people, but it was rich and we learned a great deal. Easier to say when we're looking back, I suppose, but I think that's very much the case. So what did we learn? And I think of these as sort of principles of transparency in budgeting. Honesty. That's going to seem obvious to you, but I think it's not a bad idea to say them out loud. Always tell the truth to everybody, to staff, to the finance committee, to the vestry, to the congregation. Always tell the truth. Inclusiveness is important. We need to involve the right people at the right points in the process so that they have information and context. There are a lot of smart people in our congregations, smart about a lot of things, but there's certainly people who are smart about finance and budgeting. We want to hear from those people. It's sometimes hard to hear, but the more pushback we get sometimes, the better end product we achieve. And that's a good thing. Being realistic, we shouldn't try to fool ourselves or other people's. We need to face into whatever circumstances are challenging us. We need to be confident that we can deal with them in a loving and prayerful way and with a lot of grace. We need to be creative and resourceful. As you struggle to bring your draft budget into balance, and don't we all struggle with that every year? The first draft never looks right. We need to open our minds to different points of view and fresh ideas. Easier said than done, I realize. But it is so easy to become entrenched, not to see the forest for the trees, if you will, and to wind up resistant to other points of view. That's a rich resource for us to hear what other people have to say and what advice they may give us. This is actually a personal mantra of mine besides. No surprises. During the process, we need to ensure that staff and volunteer leaders are fully aware of all the challenges and all the conflicts and the opportunities that are in the path ahead of us. It is critically important because these people are going to be approached by members of the congregation and others with questions. So we need to know. Don't surprise people. Who should be involved and when in this process? So there are really 5 groups. The first is staff colleagues who are affected by and involved with this work. When we're doing program budgeting, which is what I hope we are all doing, each staff member with program and budget responsibility is going to look closely at his or their programs and ministries, deciding what changes might have to happen for the next year. They're sort of the people on the ground, if you will. And of course, your finance committee needs to be involved in periodic review, updates on development of the budget, checking in with questions. They might have input. These also are people who ultimately are going to be should be deeply familiar with your budget. And so they'll be advocates in the greater parish community. And that's an important thing for all of us. But there are working committees, however those exist in your various parishes. Sometimes we're going to want to involve members of those committees, both for a critical look at the programmatic budgets we're developing and also for advice and recommendations. And these too are people who should understand, at least in a basic way, how the budget for the programmatic area or ministry has been developed, so they too can serve as advocates, if only for their discrete ministries. Of course, the vestry, this is the leadership group that has to understand, support, and be a resource about the budget. This is where the importance, another place where the importance of good messaging comes into play. Everybody on the vestry has to be singing the same song about our budget, or we're in trouble. I see Mary laughing. She knows, right? So you might give your vestry a look at a semi-final draft in case you want to consider input from this group. Vestry could be a lot of people, and it's just more people talking at you about what you should or shouldn't do. But at the end of the day, you have people who are engaged and involved and who own this budget, which is really important. Finally, of course, your congregation. At All Saints, last year, because of specific restructure was taking place, we published the draft budget, saying that it would be refined through the fall as we learned more, as external circumstances changed, and that a final version, a balanced version, because the draft was not quite in balance, that a final balanced version of the budget would be taken to the vestry for approval at its January meeting. It maybe is not necessary to do this routinely, but there is an advantage to showing parishioners as we conduct the fall stewardship campaign, how the goal for that campaign fits into the bigger picture, and frankly, what's at stake if the goal is not achieved. Think about having a town hall meeting where people can see the numbers and ask questions. They will be grateful for the opportunity, and we just might learn something. And once the budget is approved by the vestry, then we should publish the budget, our monthly financials, finance committee minutes, and your independent audit if you have one. So the reminder that I want to say to you is there is nothing to be lost and a lot to be gained by practicing full transparency about your budgeting process and your church's financial situation writ large. When we tell the truth, people will trust in the leadership, and that everybody's contributed dollars are being used well and wisely. Before I stop talking at you and we have a conversation together, I do want to do one commercial here. Bishop Diane Bruce in February of 2021 did a workshop on budgeting that is chock full of important information and very good advice. It's on YouTube, probably easy to find. I'm hopeful Samantha might put a link in the chat or send us all a link later. Take an hour out of your life and watch this. I learned so much from her, and you will too, I know. She's the best. Okay, thank you so much. I am going to unshare here, and let's have a talk.
All right, thank you. So I did just put the link in the chat for Bishop Diane's workshop. For anybody that's not in the meeting and is watching the live stream, if you go to diocesanconvention.com, we do have the links to all the videos for all the workshops that we've done for Ministry Fair this year so far. So I highly recommend you go back and check it out. And now we welcome comments, questions, unmute, let's talk.
I'm very worried. You brought up the budget being so heavily weighed in HR and salaries.
Mm-hmm.
And do people give you flack about that? I mean, it's like all the money we're giving you goes to pay the rector, or, you know, I thought I was giving you money for the good works we do, or.
Yeah, I was not close to the process for a lot of years. And so whether there was flack, I honestly can't say, but it would surprise nobody that it does take staff time to run these ministries and programs, and that is part of the cost of doing business, if I could put it that way. And there's nothing embarrassing about that. There's no reason not to be straight ahead about that, so that but when it's all lumped together, can be, in the context of your total budget size,
Right,
a big number.
Right.
And then it begs that sort of question. Well, you're paying people too much, or you have too many staff, or people can make up all kinds of stories, as you probably well know. When instead we spread those personnel costs around. Now, there are certain HR expenses that are just HR expenses that don't pertain to any particular staff members. Insurance, I mean, that kind of thing. But salaries and burden on salaries. I run the giving office. That's part of the cost of the giving office, and so parishioners should see that. It costs X amount of dollars to do the giving programs that we do. Part of that is staff cost, and part of it is not. I would urge you to, if you just give it a try, spread it around once to see what it looks like if everything is all spread out, and try it on a couple people. Try parishioners you trust, maybe, or people with some kind of financial expertise. There's this way and there's this way. Which way makes sense? Or have a talk with your finance committee about it to see which way is better. Do a little test and ask some of your parishioners, how would you like to see the budget? For years Mike and I laugh about this, a secular fundraiser. So I was raising money on the non-church side of things. So people wanted to know, and there are members of All Saints Church who want to know where the money's going. How are you spending the money that we're giving you? We'll give it to you happily, joyfully, but what are you doing with it? And my God, that personnel number is enormous. What's that about? So it can be a problem. It can, I think it's only not helpful to do it that way. But I gather that's sort of more common practice than I know about, maybe. How do you do it now?
Well, we're in the middle of doing it differently. Used to be, just the line items divvied up the way we were spending money last year. Now we've been working on doing a narrative budget. So each of us with a program, I'm the mission commissioner, had to come up with what we do, and so the parishioners would know what happens with the money that we get. So write in our little stories.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's
good for you. Good for you.
All new at least for me. I've only been on the vestry. This will be my third year.
Oh, good. You're on the vestry. That's great. And narrative budgeting, which I don't have a lot of experience with, is harder, right?
Right.
Eugenia, do you know, and Donald, do you know about narrative budgeting? We could put Mary on the spot here and have her tell us about that.
Well, it's very confusing, like you said. That's as much as I've understood. I haven't seen it come to fruition.
It is really storytelling, narrative budgeting. It's not done a lot, but at least in my own limited experience. But good for you. Thank you for the question.
Sure.
Eugenia, where are you? What church are you at?
I am the lady who writes the checks for the La Magdalena Church, the mission.
Oh, wonderful.
I'm the treasurer.
Oh, wonderful.
And the one that becomes very anxious nowadays in order to be able to keep up with the budget. Thanks God, we have been able to stay afloat, but it's touch and go with such a small congregation. And we find that a lot of the people that used to come regularly have dropped out with the pandemic. And therefore, our income has decreased tremendously. So, but we do meet regularly. The Bishop Committee, there's a membership of about 8 to 10 people. And we do discuss every aspect of our budget and where all the money comes in, where all the money goes. And most of the time it is, well, the heaviest expense we have is the payroll of our minister, Father Roberto. So, so that's our biggest expense. And of course we have other needs, but we have been able, thanks God, to not to go under.
Good, good.
Yes.
Good for you.
Thank you.
Good for you. Hello, Donald. Are you Donald or Don?
Oh, Don.
There you are. And where are you?
I'm at Holy Nativity in Westchester.
Oh, wonderful. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
What do you do there?
I am the treasurer and
Good.
kind of I am the finance committee too. We're small and, you know, our budgeting is, well, I mean, we don't have much give anywhere because it is mostly salaries and it's a challenge to try to close a budget in these times.
And when do you start developing a budget for the next year?
Well, probably we'll start throwing it together in maybe October or November. But it's not, there's not much to it because the same expenses we have this year are going to be the same expenses next year. I mean, like I said, we've already heard that a lot of it is salaries, and we're basically all salaries. It is, I mean, there's not much give.
Right. Understood. Understood.
If I may, I have a question for you.
Why, Samantha? Sure.
Thank you. You were talking about the town hall, and I really like that idea. There's publishing the budget, and then there's taking that transparency another step and actually inviting people into conversation. And so I wanted to ask about your experience with the town hall. How did you set that up, and what was the structure of actually doing that meeting?
So it was, so here's where you're going to find out that I don't talk about this well. It was, I guess it would be a webinar because people could, as we are now, people could speak. And we probably had somewhere between 60 and 80 people, a lot of people. At the first one. By the time we got around to doing the first town hall, which was in sort of September 10th, something like that, the word had gotten out that this draft budget for 2021 was different, very different, that the restructure was part of it, that the budget was a lot smaller than it had been in the prior year. So there was a lot of interest, as you would imagine, because in our parishes, people are all talking, right? So it's, let's go find out what this is about. And Mike did about a 15 or so minute presentation, told the story briefly of the process we used, and then talked about the budget itself and its implication for staff structure and to some degree for programming. And then there was an onslaught of questions and comments. And we did a couple more of them throughout the fall, one on budget, another on a different topic altogether, but found that this format was an effective way for people to feel like they were, an e-blast is one thing, but they were watching the director in real time talk about what was going on with the finances of the church, and had the ability to respond. And we had more questions than we could answer, but we were able to save the chat and go back to people to the extent we knew who they were, and answer their questions in the next day or two. So we did our best to capitalize on it, to make it really be a meaningful experience both for us as the developers of the budget and parishioners who attended as those who would be asked to support that budget.
Mhm.
Am I answering your question?
Yeah, absolutely. Are you planning on doing multiple town halls again this year? Is that, I mean, you have a very large church, so I imagine
We
that
do
you
have a
do get a
large
lot of
church.
questions and
Yeah,
you want
yeah.
to do multiple sessions of it. Is that
Yeah.
something you would recommend for other churches to do?
I would actually. I would. It is. I didn't have to set it up myself, but I'm told by those who do that it's not so hard to do, and it is a great way to talk to people. And at this point, I mean, a year ago we were all still figuring out how to use Zoom, and now, relatively speaking, we're all comfortable with it, and logging
Yeah.
into a webinar is not a thing anymore. So. And with people still reluctant to show up, as we were saying before we started tonight, to show up in person a lot of places because it's just a scary time. This is a way to help people be involved without having to get out of their jammies and participate in the work and in the process. So no matter the topic, I mean, we need something substantive to be talking about. Otherwise, we wouldn't be imposing on people's time. But it is a good way to communicate with the parish, the bigger parish, more people in the parish all at one time. I would definitely encourage us all, include certainly myself, for us to do this more often.
Mhm. Okay, thank you.
I, of course, am curious about your music program.
Yes, of course you are.
How did that, were section leaders let go, or just not as many programs, or?
So we have, All Saints has 2 adult choirs and 6, maybe 7 youth and children's choirs. So a lot of singing going on, not right at the moment,
Right.
but yes, a lot of children and youth programs. And the adult choirs together about 100 people, and each one has 4 section leaders. And so what happened was that the compensation of the section leaders was reduced. They continued to sing, but they earned less money through the year. And there were a smattering. That was the bulk of the cost that was cut out. There was a smattering of other things, and we've done virtual churches. You all probably have. We resumed in-person church on June 20th. But for the 15 months prior, we did not have that. And it was, I mean, I would argue, I think, this is probably blasphemous to say out loud, recorded and all, but here, I'll go say it anyway. In a way, the music is the most obvious aspect of All Saints Church. I mean, lots and lots of people come to church and there's a choir and an organ and a piano and whatever. So and so there are a lot of people invested in that. There's the 100 singers, and then there's all their families and all their friends, and a lot of people are invested in that. So when that budget is reduced in a significant way, a lot of people notice that. And a lot of people were mad about that. And no amount, I'm just telling you like it was, no amount of saying every program and ministry that we do is taking a hit.
Oh.
We're going to lose $1 million in income.
Right.
People wouldn't hear it. Nope. This is my music program. You have to leave my music program intact. So, and eventually a handful of parishioners who felt unheard because we didn't I can't think of the word I want, bring the budget back to full 100% as it had been the year before, reduce their pledges significantly.
Wow.
This is the only way I can express myself, is to give you less money. I've been fundraising for a long time. I've heard people say this everywhere I've worked, and it always makes me just sad because it's not helpful. You know, to be mad that a program is less well funded than you would like and say, well, I'm taking my toys and going home, doesn't help the program you love so much.
Right.
So, but you know, that's the way it was, and we'll see. We'll see when we start raising money in the fall, as I probably will all do for 2022. We'll see, you know, how people are feeling about it. It was hard.
Yeah. Is your choir currently singing?
No,
With any- No.
no,
Okay.
we have soloists or a quartet maybe,
Okay.
but no, it is. There's too many people and everybody wants to sing, and it's not safe at the moment for them all together, you know, all close together and sing their hearts out as much as we'd love to. Yeah, we miss them very much.
Oh.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Any other questions, comments?
So do you think you'll ever get back to your full budget? Where you came from?
Yeah, I don't know. I just don't know. I mean, the budget, I know it's a big church, and the budget in 2019 was about $5 million.
Mhm.
It was 4 million. It was a little bit smaller last year, as I recall, but then it turned out to be such a wacky year. It's about $4 million for 2021, and the current draft budget for 2022 is significantly out of balance. So
Yeah.
I don't, as it always
Right.
is. And when you're just getting to start, you know, because we all these things that we want to do, and no, there isn't enough income or revenue, you know, to support that, and then we have to figure it out and negotiate around all of that stuff. So I don't know. I don't know when, if ever, we'll get back to as much as $5 million. And I don't. To me, it's really okay. It's about the doing the work and the ministry that serves our mission and values. And if we're forced to think more carefully about that and to sort of focus ourselves in a certain kind of a way, to me, that's healthy. That's a healthy thing.
Right.
Yeah. And as I was saying before, being realistic about it, you know, some of us, you know, might have done that in our own lives with our own checkbooks once in a while back in the day, you know, oh, I'm sure I can buy that fill in the blank because, you know, I'm being paid next week.
Right.
But it's important to be realistic about it because there's nothing to be gained by fooling ourselves as we look at this particular thing.
Right.
Yeah, I know you know that.
We were very fortunate. Our congregation remained very faithful with their tithing.
Oh,
Even
great.
we weren't meeting, but what was really hurting us was we generate income from people who rent out space in our gymnasium or conference rooms. And of course, we had to tell all of them, can't do this. So
Yeah.
that was an unexpected loss right there.
Yeah. Roughly what portion of your budget was that kind of revenue? Just ballparky.
I honestly don't know, but I'd say 100,000.
Mm-hmm. It's a lot.
It's a lot of money. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're also sharing our grounds now with another church, with the Coptic church. So that
interesting.
carried us through.
Yeah. Yeah. All Saints has been a popular spot for film shoots. I mean, It
Yes.
looks more like a Catholic church than anything. So it's popular for film shoots or short scenes from TV shows or whatever. And that all vanished, of course, you know, last year. It just wasn't happening. And a part of our parking lot that we rented to the Superior Court, the Pasadena courthouse is just adjacent to our campus. But there was no court going on, and still jurors are very reluctant to show up. So they can't have trials if there are no jurors, and it's complicated. Yeah, it's complicated. I don't think we're done yet, but we'll see.
No.
How did that go with publishing a draft budget? When you said that you first published your first draft and it
Mhm.
wasn't yet in balance. How did that go with the back and forth with the congregation as you worked toward a balanced budget? Was that well received? That we're like the really draft stages of things before?
Yeah, I don't think it had ever been done that way before. I can't remember ever seeing a draft budget.
Mhm.
And the story that went with that was we around the need to determine a goal for the stewardship campaign in the fall. That is, of course, a major piece of the income budget would be hitting the goal, whatever that would be, and we needed to do our best to get the closest to balanced budget we could to understand what the story was
Mm.
that we were telling in respect to the coming year. Because, I mean, there's not a lot of us can't do this very well, but we should be able to look at a budget for any nonprofit organization and tell the story of the nonprofit before they tell it to us.
Mm.
So that was part of it as well. We were motivated by the campaign goal and by the story we're going to tell. And we promised that the budget that would be taken to the vestry for its approval at its January meeting would be balanced. And it was. I
Mhm.
mean, there are situations in which boards of nonprofits will approve deficit budgets, but it's not a good idea, certainly not as a general rule. And we were not interested in taking a deficit budget. So we promised that would happen, and it did. And then we said, and here it is, and your vestry has approved it. Then it's up on the website. Have a look.
Yeah, that seems like it would really enhance that feeling of trust, that connection when like you're inviting the congregation to be a part of the process from the very beginning. This is where we're starting. We want you to know everything. And then following through on your word at the end of the process, we got there. We got to a balanced budget, and really having that back and forth, I think really enhances that sense of trust and transparency.
I hope so. That was the idea. I think that this year we're a little later on the calendar in doing this work, but last year was so weird that we just had to start as early as possible.
Yeah.
So that I think though that when we publish a draft budget this year, it probably also will be out of balance, but not by not much at all. And Mary and I were laughing about the master chorale that I ran for so many years. It was always true that in the first iteration of the budget for the coming season, we were $700,000 in the hole. Always true. And then it was, talking to the music director about maybe we don't do that, we do that, and trying to come together. And that's it's the same thing here. It's just that I wouldn't publish a draft with that big a hole in it. You would just scare everybody. But we determined early we had nothing. We were not, obviously the content of a lot of our conversations needed to be confidential because of the personnel things we were talking about and so forth. But once we went public with it, we were not going to have any secrets about it. And it felt very good to go at it that way, I have to say.
Good. We're just about at the top of the hour. Any final questions, comments?
I found this very helpful.
Thank you, Mary.
Trying to find a way to do a narrative budget, all these other helpful hints gotten here.
Good. Thank you. I'm so glad you joined us. Thank you so much for giving us an hour of your day.
Oh,
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Eugenia.
Thank you so much.
Good
All
luck.
right. Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Ada. Thank all of you for joining us this evening.
Thank you, Ada.
As a reminder, this session was live streamed to the diocesan Facebook page and YouTube channel, and the resources will be available on the convention website at www.diocesanconvention.com. The website also has the schedule for upcoming stewardship workshops and the links to register. So once again, thank you all for joining us and have a wonderful night.
Oh.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.